Hi there, welcome to Bible/Chat. Jason, hi.
Hi.
How are you? Good. We had a little pre-video chat
But
about what
they'll understand why.
Yeah.
It's a very sensitive
It
subject.
is actually a very sensitive topic. Today we're going to be talking about an answer to a question, a follow-up question that
Yep.
we talked about. We talked about the caveats for divorce and remarriage.
Matthew 19 and others.
Specifically Matthew 19,
Mhm.
Where Jesus says, right,
Verse 8 and
yeah.
verse 9. Yeah.
Verse
Sorry.
9. So it's the issue
Sorry.
of like if you unless there's some sexual act
Except for immorality.
you cannot divorce or remarry.
Yep.
That's actually committing adultery.
Yep.
And what we sort of talked about, we talked about how that functionally happens and why that's a caveat,
Yeah.
and how then elders can evaluate those things, all that. And I think it was a helpful video.
Yeah.
Someone followed up and said, "Well, what about what other acts would count as immorality?"
Yeah.
And the reason why is because obviously, like in Matthew 6, Jesus says, "If you look at a woman with lust in your heart,
Yeah.
you've committed adultery with her already."
True.
So areas like pornography and other things where
Yes.
a person is sinning sexually,
Yes.
but not necessarily with another person.
Right.
Does that meet the standard? And then
Good
sort of
question.
how broad is the standard and how narrow is the standard? Why? And then is there a textual basis for that? So jump into the deep end there. That makes me want to die.
So this is what they don't teach you in seminary. Prepare for the worst. Hope for the best. No, it's a really good question because actually, immorality could be, in one sense, it's a broad term.
That's used in Matthew 19.
Yeah, the word is literally porneia, from which we get a word like pornography, right?
Yeah.
We would say, in a nutshell, I think the Bible teaches that it's immorality
Yeah.
when it is physical adultery,
Yeah.
with another person.
Yeah.
When in some capacities we're saying that relationship is consummated, right?
Gotcha. In some capacity.
In some
yeah.
capacity, it becomes one flesh.
Yeah.
How? We're not going to get into all the particulars, and
Right.
the Bible
We don't
doesn't
need
either.
to, I don't
think
think,
it's
yeah.
commonsensical.
Yeah.
At a certain point, the barrier has been crossed.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So the question then goes back to, well, what about something like rampant pornography use?
Right.
Unrelenting pornography use. Does that count for, is Matthew 19:9,
Yeah.
does that cover that?
Yeah.
And while that is an awful sin, and you mentioned Matthew 6, it's something that, needs to be dealt with, and it's, it's clearly wicked and evil, and it is immoral. We would say it does not qualify under the exception clause.
Gotcha.
In
terms of divorce and remarriage.
Divorceable, yeah. It could be church disciplinable. Guy's unrepentant and says, no, I'm not going to stop, but I'm a believer still. That, like any other sin, though.
Yeah.
Unrepentant, not remorseful.
Yeah.
We would still discipline that, right? Give that process. But in the case of divorce, and this is where, because marriage is so valued by God, He hates divorce.
Yeah.
What God has joined together, let no man, split asunder or separate. And it's not to say that that's not a hurtful thing, that's not a damaging thing, it's not an awful thing, along with physical adultery, of course. But, that's why there's an exception clause, We want to be very careful to guard that.
Yeah.
Not because we want to just rush into putting them back together and say, okay, you're the guy and you sinned, but now you're... And we don't want to pronounce false peace and make things just so easy and cheap in the process.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to be careful to really guard 19:9, Matthew 19:9, and the other exception clause texts, like in 1 Corinthians, right? Because marriage is huge, and so we don't want to just toy around with it and cheapen it.
Totally. So you would say, okay, good, we want to deal with that sin, right? But no, you can't move toward divorce.
It's not a part of the exception clause.
So then church discipline, in one sense, functionally moves that person into the 1 Corinthians 7
if they go all the way
category,
through
maybe.
to the end,
Yeah, so in one sense, God's given means of dealing with those things. It's just that it doesn't necessarily meet that standard.
Right, as opposed to where the guy or the gal goes out and has a relationship, physical relationship with another person.
Exactly. Physical act of consummation, another person.
Then it's not a done deal, it's allowable now, permissible
Yeah.
to divorce, as, we talked about in the last couple of podcasts.
Totally.
So,
Good.
tough, but we want to be careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Very, very careful on discerning how we use Matthew 19:9. It's not to be used willy-nilly.
Yeah.
Okay, immorality, so everything under the sun, because I'm not happy with my spouse, I don't trust them. All understandable.
Yeah.
They have to
and
earn
evil
back.
sins.
Oh, yeah.
And painful and all that stuff. We get all that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't meet that standard.
Exactly. That's all we're saying. And we want to guard this text and its intent, which guards marriage and makes it very, very like careful how and when you can divorce if the Lord leads to that point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we want to also say that sin is horrible, anything like that, of course. And so both.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. Super helpful, man. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Yeah, it's important to clarify those things, I think.
Yeah,
I think it's
very.
helpful. And especially like a person who's in a situation where they're married to someone who maybe has struggled with sexual lust
issues. Yeah.
Maybe in pornographic ways, but not necessarily active ways.
Yeah.
You know, that person shouldn't be holding on to those sins in some sense, saying like, well, did this meet this standard or whatever, you know? So just like, which should free them up to forgive them and you know, seek out biblical care in their local church. So good, awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Thanks. I hope that's helpful for you. If you have any questions, you can always email us at info@faithbibleoc.org. See you next time.